with this, I think what we are going to be discussing today is something that I hold very close to my heart. I have worked on it for almost 2 decades now, and it's one space that makes me believe has the biggest potential for HR and HR experts to unlock in terms of their results for organizations. While change management sounds very esoteric, what I've come to learn over the last couple of years is that it is way of life. It is not something that we run as tracks. It is not a placebo put in a jar that we can pop in or give to organizations as a remedial measure. It is something that has to become a way of life culture at organizations. And that is what I wanted to speak on today. And I have seen myself change alongside the entire change management tracks that I have covered in my previous things. But one thing that has stayed with me all the while is that unless you make it practical, unless you make it doable, unless you desire to make it a way of life, change does not happen. And change management, by definition, obviously is something that we all understand that it is helping individuals, teams, and organizations navigate and meander through times of change. Also, what has happened, I believe, is that over last 1 year, at least 10 months that we've been in this pandemic, there has been a lot of change, significant amount of change, quantum leaps in the way we worked earlier and the way we work now. And therefore, the concept of then and now on change management. Otherwise, it was always an evergreen element in work lives for people, in personal lives for people. And, but I think the importance of the topic that we are discussing today, how it was back then, and change management, how it has morphed today, especially in context of this pandemic, also has a significance for all of us. So, how I plan to run through this next 40-50 minutes that we spend together, I would love it to be conversational. I would want us to be able to put up our questions, put up our point of views in the chat box or in the Q&A section, wherever it is available. And we will have conversations around that so that we are able to make meaning of this. So this is not going to be an academic session from my end. I will try and make it as execution oriented as possible, as practical as possible, because academically, I think we're all HR experts and we've read and heard much more than probably anyone else in the corporate fraternity. So I will keep my conversations around real-time examples, a lot of anecdotes that I have been through personally, what my colleagues have been through personally. And then by the end of it, I think we would have covered a lot of questions that would be cropping up in our minds as to how to make change management work, what change management is, and how do we make it happen in our work lives. So that will be my intent, participants. And please feel free to put in questions as and when, and I'm sure the coordinator here would be able to, and Peterson, feel free to stop me. If there is a relevant question at a relevant point in time, feel free to stop me and as it goes.
Sure, Sannati.
Yes?
Yeah.
So I have been a change management expert. In fact, 8 years of my career, I was leading the change management practice. By the time I left Mahindra Satyam, it was already Tech Mahindra then. I was part of the change management practice, and I was leading the change management practice for Tech Mahindra. And we worked on multiple change management projects across the globe, not only in India, but across the globe. We had the opportunity to go around the globe and understand and execute a lot of change management projects. And that is when I realized that change management is a science that we all need to build into our life cycles, work life cycles. It starts as a paving block. It starts with having a very clear business case. First and foremost, I think the important thing that the team should be able to establish is a business case for any large scale or a small scale change project. And that is why we as HR fraternity have to be responsible for ensuring that whenever a large change management project gets executed or taken up, we are able to well establish a business case for that change. The business case for the change, when I talk of business case for the change, what I intend to state is what is in it for three entities. What is in it for the business at large? How does it impact the business objectives? What is in it for the teams that are existing in the organization, whether it impacts the HR team, finance team, supply chain team. So what, answering the question, what is there in that change project for me, for you, for departments, and for individuals. So at three levels, having to establish a true business case is a very core responsibility of the change team. Now, identification of that change team is entirely up to the organizations. Who form the part of the change team is entirely up to the organization. But the key driver of that change should be able to establish a very sound business case. Secondly, once you've established the business case, it is very important for us to be able to then garner support from the leadership team. More and more I work on large scale changes in organizations, I realize that if we've not been able to onboard the leadership into our change projects, we will come across multiple roadblocks. And therefore, onboarding of leadership, and we will peel the onion as it goes, onboarding of the leadership is the second biggest piv that you have to put in your journey of change. First, you've established a business case. Once you've established the business case, you should try and garner your support from the leadership team, because these leaders are going to be your sounding board, your microphone, and provide you a lot of inlets into the grassroots of the organization. So if you are able to have a sound business case, getting leadership onboarded is relatively easy. So you need to first have a business case, align the leadership of the organization, and then start thinking of unfolding the change project. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we announce large scale change projects without having to onboard the leaderships across the organization. And therefore, my request and my suggestion to teams that lead changes, first, align your leadership within the organization, cross-functional, whether the project is going to touch them or not. I think alignment of leaders across the functions is going to be very critical. Once you've been able to onboard the leaders in the organization, that's the time you have to start unfolding your plans. You have to be able to get your diagnostics. And typically, change projects happen in 2 phases. And back then, when I almost 10 years back, 10, 12 years back, when I was leading these change projects, these used to be long term, 1 year long, 2 year long implementation projects that would have technology implementations, that would have large scale structural changes in the organizations, and these would have a long gestation period. So it would take about 6 months to 1 year to even years projects that I have been part of. So, and therefore, planning at that time we had a lot of time at our hand to be able to plan a lot of things. So we typically divided our change projects in three stages. One is before the implementation or the preparation phase. Second was the implementation phase, and the third was the sustenance phase. And this is typically, if you also navigate through the multiple websites, you will see PROSAI's framework of change management is also typically formulating in these three categories. You have a preparation, you have an implementation, and you've got a post implementation. And that is how we typically operated. So in the preparation stage, you are supposed to, even before the preparation stage begins, it is important for one to be able to get a clear business case and onboard the leaders. After that, your preparation phase begins. That's when you do all your organizational diagnostics. Now, different kind of change projects will require different types of diagnostics for you to engage into. Now, multiple tools exist. If you're doing a change project, and I will give you an interesting example of one of the change projects that I was engaging in. At the time, I was working with one of the consulting firms. So we were given a project with Government of India. I'm sure you would have heard SPMCIL. It's a printing and the minting corporation. They mint coins and make currencies for Indian currencies. So we were given a large scale change project with them, and they were doing an ERP implementation of their core processes. So that included supply chain, that included procurement, that included their production process, that included their financial processes, their business intelligence process. So they were doing an ERP implementation across their entire, so it's a mini Navratna, and they were doing this large scale implementation project. And I was leading their change management effort. Now, all was well. We were, in a typical IT implementation, you have your diagnostic phase where you're doing your as-is assessment, then you do your requirement gathering, you create multiple templates. So all that was going on very well. And suddenly people get called in one day, and the CMD says that, look, my team is very upset, and the plant, so they've got 9 plants across the country. The plant teams are very unhappy because they believe that they will have job losses. And that came to us as a surprise because we were supposed to be doing the technology transformation. We were not really worried whether their plant teams are going to be upset, or whether they will have people related issues in the entire process with respect to the technology implementation. And that's exactly the time when I was called in. So when the CMD raised this issue that they are expecting people related disturbances and pushbacks, is the time that we realize that we will need a full-fledged change management project and a change management track to run along. So it was easy for the business team of that organization to engage in a project without realizing that if they did not have a solid track, they will have a lot of pushback. And that's when I was introduced into the system, and that's when we kind of decided to take it very sequentially. That project ran for a good 2 years, and by the end of the second year, we did exceedingly well. We had transformed the way they were doing business. Everything from a complete manual workforce, we had come up with a state where they're now actually making decisions based on business intelligence that comes out of the system. So that was the kind of journey that that organization took 2 years. Now, yes, it was a government organization, the change comes in slow. But the similar kind of responses we get in non-government organizations also. And therefore, it was important for us to weave in change management tracks in all the organizations that we went on to work with going forward from there. So coming back to, that was a short story. Coming back to the change management track, once your leadership team is onboarded, you have to get into the preparation phase and conduct a lot of diagnostic tests. Now, those diagnostic tests comprise of multiple things, like what kind of the impact will the project have on its multiple stakeholders? What kind of impact will the project have on business outcomes? What kind of impact will the stakeholders have on the project? So it's a two-way process. When you're running, say, a technology implementation or a structural change implementation, you have to understand what that change will do to the people, and you have to understand what will people do to the project. Right? When you're running a project, whether there will be resistance, whether there will be easy flow of the process, you have to be able to establish both sides of the coin. So what is the impact of the process and the change on people, and what is the impact of the people on the process and change? I think these are two things that you have to assess in your diagnostic phase, in your preparation phase, while you're running a large scale change or even a small scale change. I'll give you a small example of my current organization that we are engaging, that I'm working for. So Sapphire Foods, we run about more than 355 Pizza Hut and KFCs across the country. So these stores that we have are based across the country. So, and I'm sure most of you have had the opportunity to either dine in at a Pizza Hut or eat out at a KFC outlet. And the large scale change that, and we've got about 10,000 people working with us. So we said that our HRIS, our human resource information system, when I joined the organization, was basically Excel sheet. So imagine a state when you are handling 10,000 people on Excel sheets. You're joining people in on Excel and they're resigning on an Excel. And there used to be a time when I came in when we had almost 500-600 people 3 years back would not get their salaries on time. Why? Because someone forgot to join them in that Excel sheet. Now that's easy for me to say that, oh, I forgot, or the HR team at the stores or the store manager saying, I forgot to send that information to the central office. But imagine the team member who's come to work for us, he or she's worked with us for a month, and he realizes that they will not be getting salary because someone forgot to punch them into the system. And that was the state, that was an acceptable way of working. Imagine 3 years, 4 years back, it was okay to have people work for 1 month, and at the end of the month say that, look, this month you cannot get your salary, we'll give it to you in next month. Such a sad state for an organization to be in. And that's when I got in and I said, look, we need to change this. We need to move to a place where we are able to pay a person even if he or she works for 1 day in a month. If he's worked for 1 day in a month, he should be able to get paid for that day in a month. That's when we invested in our HRIS. this HRIS platform itself was a big ticket challenge for people to accept. You know, earlier they were used to picking up the phone and say, "Sir, मेरा salary नहीं आया है, क्या करें?" तो सर बोलेंगे, "हाँ ठीक है, भूल गए, अगले महीने उसको बोलो आएगा." From going from there to now reaching out through the HRIS and figuring out that how you will get your salary on time, and that responsibility shifting suddenly from HR teams to the store teams to the managers and to the employee became a big sea change for people. Suddenly, that telephone was taken away from them, and a terminal was put to them saying that if you want your issues to be resolved, this is the terminal. Reach out through this terminal, and your turnaround time is going to be 24 hours. And imagine the change that they had to go through. They were okay waiting for another 15 days for an HR team to call them and tell that, look, we forgot to give your name and that's why you've not got the salary, versus a immediate response on the HRI saying your name is not being registered. So something that is, you know, when I was talking of what is in it for me, even when there is a big positive in it for them that they will get the information right away, the change was not a very friendly one for them. So they were still resisting that change. The store teams still were not comfortable because suddenly a person was replaced by a computer. Now, what happens in such cases is that you have to be able to understand and start mitigating these risks even before you start engaging in the project. So you have to imagine the end state. So first and foremost, after you've created a business case, and how did I go about creating a business case? I went and presented to the leadership team saying that, look, this month 600 people have not got their salaries paid. They were also okay with it. I said, okay, pay them next month. I said, this is not acceptable. I will pay them next month, but this is not something that's going to go away like this. Next month, I went again. I said, look, those 600 plus the 600, 1200 people we've paid late. And suddenly the 1200 number was, oh my God, we're not paying 1200 people on time. So suddenly that business case built for the team. So finally, I was able to convince the leadership and my manager that we need a robust platform to make this change happen. If we want to be fair and nice employers, we should be able to invest in a nice HRIS. That's how I created the business. Now, how did I onboard the leaders? So every leader was getting this input that, no, sir, I will not be able to talk to the computer. I don't know how to use a computer like this to be able to resolve. I can punch orders on the computer, but I cannot punch my complaint on the computer. So how do I onboard leaders? So I went around talking to all the functional heads. I told them, look, today their response, all this is data based and facts based. So I would tell them that, look, today your team does not get 1,000 people don't get salary in a month or over a period of 2-3 months. Are you okay with that? No, we are not okay with that. How do you think we can resolve it? Can talking to someone centrally here resolve every time? No, it cannot. Can that person take 1,000 calls? No, he cannot. Then what do we need? We need technology. If we need technology, people need to get comfortable with it, and which is why we are investing and going into it. And slowly the leadership team realized that yes, what we were saying and all fact-based data. So what we were saying is right, and they need their teams to align to what we want to invest and emerge into. Once the leaders were on board, we started working with the teams. So we started creating, typical, what do you want out of the HRIs? What are your pain areas beyond salaries? What do you, because finally when you get an HRIs, you don't really solve for salaries, right? There are multiple things that you want to solve for. So you get the teams to understand and identify what is the pain that they are facing and then create solutions, or what is it that my process or the change process will provide so that it's going to solve for the pain that the teams are undergoing. Once you're able to create the end state scenario, finally you will show it to the team that this is how your end state is going to look like. For us to reach to that end state, these are the multiple pits. Now I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G things for me to be able to reach to that end state. Now, for us to be able to reach that end state, if this A, B, C is the pit stop, what will help me arrive at what is the success of stage A? What does success in phase A look like? So for every pit stop, you have to create what success looks like, right? It's important for the people to understand and see the impact on a sequential basis rather than seeing the last date impact. They should be able to identify what the immediate impact of the intervention is going to be. How will it change their lives over the long run and in the short run? Very importantly, in the short run, it is going to be disruptive. Trust me, when there is a large scale change, it is never non-disruptive. It creates a lot of upheaval in the system. It creates a lot of dissonance in the system. But important thing is that you should know that this dissonance is going to come, and you should know what the quantum of the dissonance is before you enter into the dissonance. I'll again give you an example. When I joined Sapphire, Sapphire was formed by taking, and I'm giving you a non-technical example here. When Sapphire was formed, there were 7 different organizations that were acquired to form Sapphire Foods, right? So 7 different franchisees that were bought over by Sapphire Foods to form Sapphire Foods. Now, 7 different franchisees meant 7 different offices. Okay, so getting everyone into under one roof was important. So imagine a person who is sitting out of Thane will have to now start coming into the Malad office. How disruptive and unhappy would that person be? Can you imagine knowing Mumbai from Thane to come to Malad is like sending me to Kalapani, right? So again, now it's not a technological change, but it is a big scale change. 7 different locations merging into one single location. Now there were, 3 organizations that were in this area. But strangely, what was the issue with them? One had an in time of 9 o'clock. They left at 6 o'clock. The other's office started at 9:30. They left in at 6:30. The other yet started at 8 o'clock in the morning and left at God knows what time. So they never left office. They came, I know they were in office by 8, but they never left office. And suddenly we told them that, look, this is Sapphire Foods. This is no longer your original entity. And therefore, different times are not okay. You'll have to come to office at same time and leave at same time. Again, such a dissonance, it created so much of sadness and anguish and anxiety that I will now have to leave my 10 o'clock local, 8 o'clock local, 5 o'clock local. And therefore, what was important? To avoid that dissonance and pain and anguish in the system, we created the long-term vision. This is what Sapphire would look like. This is the end state that we are going to work from going forward. You'll no longer be going to be working for Pizza Hut Kandivali store. You will actually be working for Sapphire Foods, which is both KFC and Pizza Hut, right? So that whole orientation required a lot. And I'm coming to the biggest point that I want to make will make or break your change process, the communication to the team. I think when you are involving the leadership, when you're creating a business case, when you're doing impact assessment, while you're doing all this, your biggest, biggest responsibility, I would say moral obligation that a change leader or people who are part of the change management team should do is communicate, communicate, and communicate. And overdive on communication is the single most critical factor that will help you cross over change successfully, the change state successfully. Get over that valley of despair. I know you all are HR professionals, and you will know the valley of despair where you first say, nah, this cannot happen to me. Then you suddenly realize it's happening to me. And then you get into that sad state and you say you'll never be able to come out of it, to a point where you actually move forward and say, let me at least explore it. And then when I explore it, I realize I can do it. And when I can do it, I realize I can master it, right? So your typical reverse iceberg model that we're all aware of as HR fraternity uh, actually is a reality. The beauty of a good change manager is to be able to crush this cycle rather than leaving people in the valley of despair for a very long time. Crush this cycle so that that downward slope is uh, felt for a minimum period of time, as less as possible, right? Peterson, I will share a quick snapshot. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can, Sandeep. You can share
Okay.
screen.
All right. Is it visible?
No, we can't see it.
Okay. I just did. I don't know why I'm not able to share it. It's nothing big. I'm just trying to show. It's nothing big. I mean, nothing that is
Okay, now we can see it.
earth-shattering.
Yeah, we
Is
can
it
see it.
okay?
Yes.
So, the CrossEye change management process. It's an IP. This is not mine. This is a CrossEye organization called Change Management, and they are almost pioneers. At the time when I was leading the change management practice, almost 10, 15 years back, we were all trained under them, and we kind of learned a lot of our change management skills from this organization and their framework. But this is a typical linear framework that most change managers use across. So it's a before the change, preparing for it, uh, in the change, when you are in the change, and then after the change has kind of settled in, how do you sustain it and make it happen for a long period of time? You all can go and navigate CrossEye three-phase change management, pretty academic in nature, but also practical depending on how you want to pick and choose and implement on. So I will stop sharing. So this is what we typically used many years back. I'm sure they would have also defined their change management process and journey, but this is how back then the change management process flowed, pretty logical at that point in time. What has now happened is that this used to be a linear continuum. If I may explain what I mean, it was a sequential process. So I would say I will first do my preparation exactly the way I was telling you about. I will first do my preparation, then I will, get into implementation of change, and then I will do post implementation. And even in the pre work, before the implementation, there is a sequence of events that you have to do. So there are a lot of tools and templates that you have to complete and fill. Then during the change, there are a lot of tools and templates and these are almost sequential in nature. So typically a large scale change would take you about 6 months to a year also. And I have done those cycles. They've been successful. So it would typically take 6 months to a year for you to be able to arrive at the end state. And then your post implementation starts, which is another 1 year long journey minimum, to say that change has become part of life. The Government of India organization that I'm referring to took about 4 years, long after I had left the project. They were still in the sustenance phase. So it worked, and it worked beautifully well. The only dissonance and disconnect is to times today is that it took a lot of time. It took enough and more time for uh, people to actually flow in that sequential process, so that continuum. It took good 1 year, to say the least, for us to say that yes, I've done a decent enough job. What has changed today, and that's the concept of now, it has all become multidimensional, non-linear form of change management. I think biggest change that I have seen over last 4 to 5 years, and maximum of it has come in last 10 months of the pandemic, that the change management process has changed the pace at it with which it worked. I think agility is one of the biggest asks of the change management framework. Gone are the times when we said I needed 1 year to bring about the change and another 1 year to make that change a way of life. Now, whatever you do, if you've done it, it should have become way of life then and there. If I tick off a box of saying, yes, I have successfully migrated to SAP, then it is not sustenance 1 year hence. It is now I'm living and eating and drinking SAP. If I say that I have changed my structure, it is now me living my and drinking my HR structure there and then. There is no longer the linear continuum of time. That availability of time that we had is one of the biggest change that has come about in the way change management flows in large scale changes, even in small scale. So, so that's that. Now, we were basically talking of how you make communication interesting. I want any one of the participants to give me an example of change that they have been part of. You can put it on the chat box, please, and we'll take it up from them. Any one participant. I'm waiting. Parvati, are you there? You want to write in one part of change management, one change management initiative that you have been part of? Will you pen that on the chat box? It's important to have examples, and which is why I'm asking the team to bring about some examples, because my change journeys from technical to non-technical, as simple as change of time in office, time and out time of office, creates a lot of pain and anxiety in the system. And how you handle it makes all the difference. So Milind has written that one of the better methods of change management may be continuous transparent communication, relevant information by leadership to the respective teams to prevent rumor mongering. Very true, Milind. While Parvati writes, we will continue. Now, a very important point that Milind has also brought about, having communication as the core a sense of your change management track. I think when you create communication, the communication should have a big pull factor in uh, you should have a big pull factor in your communication. Thanks, Parvati. I will come to your point after I finish this. And I wanted to share so I will share a small example from my current organization. We were not reinventing, kind of refreshing our performance management. So our performance management system was typically you have your list of KRAs, and then from your KRAs you say what have you done, what have you not done, and you on a 5-point scale you people get rated. So self assessment, then the manager does assessment, and then you have the entire normalization process, and voila, your appraisal cycle stands kind of complete. Now, what happens is that there are a lot of things that get missed out by virtue of having just performance as the only element being measured. And therefore, we said that we've got 5 values. Now, these 5 values should also find place in our performance management. So, after a lot of deliberation, onboarding the managers and onboarding the leaders, we said that we need to now also start evaluating values as a way of life at Sapphire Foods, not just performance. While performance matrices are good to have, important to have, we believe it is also very critical to have values as part of our assessment cycle. Fair enough. So we did the normal thing. We made the business case. We onboarded the leadership. We also onboarded the managers. But how do you make the employees feel that it is important? And how do you make them feel that it's not something that is going to bring in bias? You know, when you have softer discussions, people say, oh, he doesn't understand me. I didn't want to say that, but I was telling him that I didn't mean it like that. So we said, fair enough. Once we made our the appraisal form very objective and transparent. Exactly what Milind was bringing about, that you make it very transparent as to what you are assessing. Okay, that was one. Now then you start training people on how to assess. How do I assess values? So we created a not long, actually a very crisp format where we said, this is how you will assess. Not just that, creating formats is one, but training people on how to use it, how to be a participant and a fair participant to it is something that we started institutionalizing. I will quickly show you one short film, not a film, it's actually an animation. Just give me one moment and then I will explain the point forward. Just give me one moment. Huh? So what we started doing was that we said that, all right, now since, you know, values assessment is going to be a way of life, how do we bring people and excite people and communicate with people for them to start using this actively, for them to get comfortable with the concept of having value conversations with their teams, with their managers, with their superiors, as well as with their subordinates. I think that was one of the most important uh, agenda that we had created for ourselves. So I will show you a quick video. Just a second. Is it visible?
No, we can't see it.
Okay, so let me. Is it visible now?
Yes, now it's visible. Sandeep, is there an audio to it or it's just a visual?
Is it audible? Was it audible also?
No, it was not audible. We were able to see the video, but uh, the audio was not on.
Oh, okay. Is there a way? So, anyways, I think I can share the video here. Okay. No, not really. I don't know how to make that happen. Nonetheless, I think you got the idea of what I was suggesting, right? That we created a video where we trained people on and short videos. See, today's generation, they want short, crisp, bite-sized learnings also. So how do you attract people to actually learn the skill of having values conversation, right? How do you tell people what to look for in values and what to not look for in values while they're actually assessing their team members on values? So this was almost like a multiple such videos we shared across to the team that created the buzz around people wanting to have values. While first year value assessment didn't really impact their appraisal increments per se, but definitely it created a lot of excitement in the first year where people said that, yes, I want to do a values assessment. I want to have a values conversation. Let me say, and there were a lot of quizzes in those videos that people were supposed to respond to, and they got really excited and interested in the whole concept of assessing values and the whole concept of that finding a place in my performance management system. That was something that the 7 entities were never really, that we acquired, were never really part and parcel of. See, to me, I came from ABG. I've been in consulting. Some of these concepts were not new and novel. They were expected to be there in organizations. But when you kind of acquire an entity that is not so mature in terms of HR processes, then you have to be able to navigate through these ways of pull factor for people to adapt and adopt what you want them to learn. And that's the biggest output that a change management professional or an HR professional or any change leader should be able to bring about. How do you pull people towards your change rather than push them into a change phase? And when you push them, that valley of despair is only longer journey than a shorter one. And that's something that as change managers or anyone who's leading a large scale or a small scale change initiative should be very careful about. So go on an overdrive of communication, pull communication, not a push communication. We created a lot of Aesop fables around values because we wanted values as a way of life, not just hanging on our walls and painted on pillars in office. We wanted values as a way of life, and we wanted people to exactly know what values are, what values mean to us. And therefore, we embarked on this journey. While this journey is not yet complete, because while we became aware, then we started living. Now we've started navigating the values that Sapphire stands by. And the biggest test, thankfully, has been the pandemic situation. Those 5 values that we imbibed and we brought about that cultural change at Sapphire actually reflected very strongly in the way we responded during the pandemic. The way the teams collaborated and worked together, were willing to sacrifice for a larger cause. you know, in the pandemic, there were decisions, hard decisions that we took. We went in for a salary cut. We asked our people openly, what do you want? People, job losses or salary cuts? Unanimously, people said we'll go for salary cuts. And therefore, that buy-in of those salary cuts was from within. People believe that, yes, if I do a salary cut, the company will survive, we will survive, and everyone will come on the other side much safer. And we were one of the first ones to reverse our salary cuts. In a matter of 2-3 months, we had to undergo shortcuts. But I think not a single soul who said, look, I want to leave because I am having a salary cut. Right? Whereas now I am inundated with CVs from across the organizations, across functions saying I want to leave because we still have not got back our salaries. Sapphire that way was early starter because everyone was aligned. Not a single person said no, we can't do it. They all said unanimously, yes, let us go ahead and do that. And 10,000 people, it's not less number of people, right? So the way you handle change makes it more palatable and easy to meander and make success out of it, irrespective of whether it's a technology change, process change, people change, soft change, hard change. Uh, Irrespective of that, I believe, and I have lived it successfully, that if you do it well, if you have a strong business case, if you have your leaders onboarded, if you've been able to communicate it well, if you've been able to identify the impact of your change properly and communicate the impact of that change properly to your people, people are more than willing to support and go through with the change and make the change a way of life rather than artificially and optically do it and go back to doing their own thing when no one else is. That has been my what's return on change investment? Do we have matrix? How does life cycle assessment of change? How the life cycle assessment of change is possible? So I think Dr. VLN, an interesting question that you put in. Return of investment on change is your business case. One sound advice, if I ever want to give to professionals, is don't engage in a change till it does not have a business case. So instead of asking for an ROI of change after you engage on a change journey, my humble request to all of you is first identify what that change will bring about. Is there value in bringing about the change or not? That return on investment should be defined before you engage on a change journey, not after you've engaged on it. So I think the question should not be what is the return. Question should be, if there is a return, should I engage on a journey? If there is no return, don't invest in a change journey. No one has the time or the bandwidth or the energy if there is no return. Now that return can be short term or long term depending on what you want. But Dr. VLN, I believe unless there is a return, don't engage on the change journey. I establish your return and only then engage. Do we have matrix? Yes, your business case is your matrix. What did I want to arrive at when I said Sapphire is 1, it is not 7 and my agenda in life was from optics to feel. Everything should change. So I had my matrices. For optics, I said, did people come in on time? Yes. For practices, I said, do we sit together and have tea, coffee, lunches? Yes. For policies, I said, do we have same policies and are those policies adhered? Yes. For feel, do I have a culture that resonates Sapphire values? We engaged into a survey, we engaged into Gallup Q12, which is a baseline that we said we should be able to establish. But yes, Your matrices are your business case. Whatever is your business case, your matrices come out of it. So if you're wanting to implement ERP, why are you wanting to implement ERP? I want to shorten my inventory carrying days. So that is your matrix. I want to reduce my attrition. That is your matrix. So from your business case comes your matrices. There are no change. According to me, I believe that the pit stops may be there, but your final matrices are business case metrics. Okay, what makes change management more practical and viable? How do leaders ensure that people can accept it without much resistance? I think the practical element of change management is what I have harped upon throughout my talk that I have had, where uh, the only way to look at it is through business lens. Look at it from what are you arriving for the business, work out your matrices for the business, then make sure that you have people who are uh, aligned. So have one-on-one conversations with managers and leaders, onboard them, make them understand the benefit, what is in it for them on an ongoing basis before you're able to really say that, I will be able to do justice to the change process. So I think that's very important. Tushar, that's for you. Any other questions? Great, then we can call it a day, Peterson. Hello.
Yes, Peter is not yet in. I believe he has dropped off the call.
No problem. Thank you all. I think have a good day. Stay safe and take care.